Dear devotees and Dhamma friend, now we are going to start our Dhamma discussion. Today, Dr. Bhagya and our Dhamma friends, they are going to start our Dhamma discussion.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today. So, as Bhante said, today we have our second Dhamma discussion. So we had our first ever Dhamma discussion during our Vesak celebration day. So today is our Poson celebration day, and we are having our second Dhamma discussion. Because we have so many festivities and rituals planned for this Poson celebration, I thought of focusing this discussion today around the Poson festival. So I have my dear colleagues and friends all around me, and I have to declare first, I am just moderating, so you are very welcome to hop in at any time. So I will start the discussion, and Bruce will pass the microphone to you. And of course we can ask the questions, and I will try to answer as much as I can. I'm still a learner, not an expert. So hopefully we'll learn from each other and have a good time during this discussion. So Poson Poya Day, or Poson celebration, right? So what is the significance of the Poson Poya Day or Poson celebration? Does anyone know? Does anyone would like to kind of talk about it? All right. I can go ahead and provide like a brief introduction. So last time we talked about the Vesak, right? So Vesak is the most important celebration among Buddhists, because Vesak denotes the birth, enlightenment, and the passing away of Lord Buddha. So Vesak is our most important festival. Then we have Poson. Poson, I would say, it's the second most important festival, especially for us Buddhists in Sri Lanka. So Vesak is celebrated all over the world. Poson is somewhat special to Sri Lankans because it denotes the arrival of Buddhism to Sri Lanka. So I would say about 2,000 years ago, during the day of Poson, Buddhism arrived in Sri Lanka, and that's what we are celebrating today. And of course, we are very, very grateful that we got this new philosophy. So to celebrate that, we have these several rituals to celebrate the festival, and also thank the contribution of the noble monks, especially Arahath Mahinda Thero, who brought the Buddhism to Sri Lanka. So Bhante already kind of mentioned the various different celebrations that we plan for today. Does anyone kind of like to add to it? Like, do you know what type of celebrations that we have planned today? Special celebrations for Poson? I mean, you've already participated in it, right? You were here from the morning, so.
Well, it's something. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the significance of the Poson full moon is, as you pointed out, the arrival of Buddhism to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been a culture for, well, they've had a written history that goes back something like 2,500 years. So you can imagine in that length of time, there's been a lot of time for famous kings to be around. So there have been very many famous kings in Sri Lanka, and one of the most important is Devananda. His reign was from 247 to 207 BC, and At the same time as he was reigning in Sri Lanka, in the northern part of the country, there was a great emperor in India named Ashoka. And the story of Ashoka, for people, if they haven't read about him, is absolutely fantastic. It's just such a fascinating study. But the importance to Sri Lanka is that at a certain point in Ashoka's reign, he pulled together the Third Buddhist Council, and that had several important outcomes. One of the most important things to happen in that council is that he sent emissaries to various countries around the perimeter of his empire. He sent 3 emissaries to what much of the world refers to as the Holy Land, what we think of as the Holy Land. He sent emissaries to Syria, to Alexandria and Egypt, and also to areas of Greece. So it's very interesting to me to think that Buddhism would have at least been known to what we refer to as the Holy Land in BC times, and I wonder how that may have influenced our own religion. He also sent an emissary north to Kandahar in what is now Afghanistan. He sent an emissary to an area around Burma and Thailand. And very importantly, he sent an emissary to Sri Lanka. In fact, it wasn't just an ordinary emissary, it was his own son. So his son was sent to Sri Lanka. Now we know that King Devananda and Emperor Ashoka were friends, although they probably never met. They sent gifts back and forth to each other. So King Ashoka wanted to share the gift of the Dhamma to his friend King Devananda. So the story is that at a certain point he sent his son in about 250 BC. Remember that Buddhism was not really known in Sri Lanka at the time. So the story is that King Devananda was out hunting one day with several of his friends, and he happened to come around a corner, and what do you know, there was the emissary, his son, Emperor Ashoka's son, that had been sent to Sri Lanka. Well, he didn't know who this was. He was clad in the orange, robe. He thought at first that he was a god of some kind, and he was kind of scared. But he soon found out that he was actually the son of Emperor Ashoka, and he was converted to Buddhism. And that very point, that very location is still venerated to this day. It's a place just southwest of Anuradhapura called Mihintale, I think is how it's pronounced. Even as we speak right now, thousands of people are converging on Anuradhapura and Mihintale to make a pilgrimage. So just imagine that, people from all walks of life are making this pilgrimage. They might have made this pilgrimage several times. Maybe they're wealthy and they can do it all the time. But for a lot of people, this is really a dream. It's a dream to make this pilgrimage maybe once in their lifetimes. Maybe they're poor, and it really is an effort for them to make this pilgrimage. So the celebration of Poson is, of course, really important to us as Buddhists, but it's also wrapped up in the legends of Sri Lanka. So it's a legendary thing it's part of the deep history of Sri Lanka. And in making this pilgrimage, you're not just participating in a Buddhist event, but you're making this pilgrimage and really expressing who you are as a Sri Lankan. So as I've been thinking about this, I thought maybe there was an interesting tie-in to karma also. So think of it. Think of what karma is. Karma it can bear fruit immediately. It can bear fruit at some later point in your life, but it can also bear fruit lifetimes later. So just imagine, I mean, could Emperor Ashoka of India ever have imagined that this important event would change the history of Sri Lanka, and it would eventually come to this far-off land that Europeans, nobody really knew about, called America. And here we are at Hoagland, Indiana, and we're still celebrating something, and a bit of karma that King Ashoka and also King Devananda that they set in motion is still bearing fruit today, right here in Northeast Indiana. So it's a really terribly important thing that we're celebrating today. Again, not just a Buddhist event, but an important part of Sri Lankan history.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce, for that very detailed introduction. And yes, it's a very nice thought, right? When you think about the one person's action affecting us after like 2,000 years, right? So, like you kind of alluded to, the main festivities around Poson festival happens in Mihintale area because that's exactly where it happened, right? So these festivities include observing 8 precepts or sometimes 10 precepts. And of course there's meditation like you guys did today. And there's like lanterns, parades, and of course dana and making offerings to monks, Lord Buddha, and Arahath Mahinda. So it's a very, very festive time in Sri Lanka. So, but what we kind of have to remember is while we are celebrating, right? While we are celebrating and being thankful for Arahath Mahinda and Emperor Asoka for their contribution. Embedded in some of this celebration is us realizing the impermanence of life. Like, for example, think about offering of flowers, right? So it's not just, you're just like looking at the flower, enjoying the beauty. It's not just dana. When you look at a flower, right, the flower looks beautiful maybe today or tomorrow, but after a couple of days, right, it's not beautiful anymore. So think about it, like we can think about it as like, about you as well, right? I mean, in us, of course, we have very long lifespan, so you cannot see it as soon as that. But when you're offering flowers, offering, incense, or offering like lamps, for example, right? Think about how impermanent that is. When you're kind of offering it, at that point, it looks brilliant, it looks beautiful. But what happens after a day or two? So that's why I'm trying to kind of emphasize the fact that, of course, there are rituals, right? It's a highly celebrated event, but there are underlying meaning for some of these rituals. And again, when you think about the dana, right? Dana is detachment, giving away. You make the food, for example, right? You try hard, make it delicious as possible, and then you give it away. So there you're practicing detachment, right? So what I'm trying to emphasize is, again, underlying these traditional rituals, there is this embedded Buddhist, like very deep, meaningful Buddhist concepts in there. So now that we kind of talked about rituals, since Bruce mentioned about the story of Emperor Asoka and Sri Lankan King Devananda, and as you said, Bruce, it's a very interesting story, right? So I was thinking of maybe we should kind of start talking about it. You might have heard about Emperor Asoka, you might have read about it. So here's what I know. So Emperor Asoka, he was the last emperor of the Mauryan dynasty in India. And he was a very, very powerful emperor. And, I mean, he behaved as normal emperors would, right? He was, at least in the beginning, he was very, very power hungry. And he wanted to be the only king in India, right? So he invaded neighboring lands. And slowly, he expanded his empire. So what happened was, at a certain stage, again, according to the stories, there was this invasion of a neighboring land called Kalinga. So the Kalinga land, I think today it is like the Orissa region of India. So invasion of Kalinga wasn't easy because Kalinga province, they had like very good soldiers, right? They had very good warfare. So it wasn't easy, but Asoka, of course, won. It was very powerful. But after winning that, he wasn't happy. So the story says that after winning this land, right, he walked around and all he saw was, dead bodies, like pieces of bodies and people crying, destruction, damage to properties, damage to houses. So at that point, he realized, winning lands or being emperor doesn't mean anything, right? And he felt bad for it because he's the person who's responsible for all of this destruction, right? So at that point, he started thinking about it, and slowly, he realized there is this philosophy called Buddhism, which is kind of beneficial for all living beings, not just humans, but also animals and plants. So he kind of started studying about it, and later became a supporter or a patron of Buddhism. So that's the story that I've heard. But I know some people say that his conversion to Buddhism, we cannot pinpoint one single event. He was kind of thinking about it from the early stages of his life. But at the end, the story is he realized, how wrong his ways were, right? And later he improved his ways. And after becoming a Buddhist, it was kind of like a cultural renaissance in India. So if you read some of the history, like Indian history, you see like all these like great art and carvings that were done in King Asoka's time. I think what kind of contributed to that was the freedom that people got, right? So when you are not fighting other lands, right? When you don't have to spend your time, thinking about invading other land, you have that freedom to be creative, right? So that's why I'm kind of thinking about it as like cultural renaissance, right? So people were very happy, at least for like about 50 years during Asoka's reign. So in addition to that, he was known for building 84,000 temples and stupas throughout India, And also he built these kind of like monuments in the areas where important events of Lord Buddha's life happened, like the area where Lord Buddha's birth happened and enlightenment happened and the passing away happened. So he basically denoted these areas by resurrecting. They were kind of like pillars, like rock pillars, so that people know this is where our Lord Buddha was born, and this is where he was enlightened, and this is where he was passed away. So how do we know all of this? King Asoka kept very detailed records. So he had these like rock inscriptions of major events of his life and major decisions that he has taken during his reign. So that's how we know all of these things in great details. So other than doing these like great things to support Buddhism, he also built hospitals for animals, right? And he also built roads, wells, and improved infrastructure. Again, that all coming from that freedom that you get when you don't have to fight another nation, right? And I also read somewhere that, I'm not sure whether this is a direct quote of Asoka or not. At some point, King Asoka said something like, my countrymen are like my children. So because of that, I am fully responsible for their happiness in this life and the life after. So he made sure that all of his countrymen were happy in this life by improving infrastructure, building hospitals, roads, and all that, right? And how did he make sure that they're happy afterlife? By teaching them Buddhism, right? With Buddhism, you have this great philosophy. You become a good person, and we believe that when you do good deeds, right, you are collecting good karma, and then your next life, you'll be in a better, much, much better position. So that is kind of like a complete change of attitudes when you think about emperors. So emperors before him, they were kind of like gods, right? They wanted to appear as gods in front of their countrymen, but Ashoka completely changed that after becoming a Buddhist. And of course, during his time, there were people following other religions as well. He wasn't forcing them to become Buddhist. And he was very, very tolerant of people following other religions. So I think when I read that story, right, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a emperor or a ruler like that today, right? I mean, so tolerant of people's beliefs and thinking about countrymen as his own children, right? So it makes me very, I don't know, emotional, and also it's difficult to believe, like 2,000 years ago, there was this emperor, right? And he had this extremely forward-thinking attitudes, and these attitudes were still struggling today, right? So, yeah, so that's my story about Emperor Ashoka, and I'd kind of like to invite you to share your thoughts I mean, if you heard this story for the first time, what do you think? Or else, if you read about Emperor Ashoka before, please share your knowledge with us.
Okay, I'll say something about Ashoka. I should have mentioned earlier that one of the reasons that Emperor Ashoka sent his emissaries to other lands is not just to try to convert everybody to Buddhism, but it was to demonstrate that you don't have to rule by might. You can rule by the Dhamma, and that Buddhism and the Dhamma is a reasonable way for people to rule themselves, and that's a very important outcome of what King Ashoka was about. As was pointed out, when he invaded the area called Kalinga, it's not like they had war elephants and they had charioteers and things like that. It's not like it was a blitzkrieg that took place in just a very short period of time. There was a lead up to this war. Everybody knew the war was coming, and really nobody knew what the outcome would be. King Ashoka was much mightier than the king of Kalinga, but the king of Kalinga had the advantage that he was in a kind of a hilly area of the country, and he didn't have to do anything. He just had to defend himself. So there was no way that people could have known the outcome of what happened. And as was said, after he won, he went back to Pataliputra, the capital of his empire, and he organized like a victory parade. So he took a victory parade back down to Kalinga, and when he arrived, he sort of had like a spiritual breakdown, actually. And something inside of him that was there all the time said, what have I done? What could I have done differently? And over the period of 2 or 3 years, he actively sought out people to teach him how to be a better emperor. And it's said that he had at least 2 teachers, one of which was none other than the disciple of one of the Buddha's disciples. So yes, King Ashoka is terribly important, but to tie back into Sri Lanka, the Mauryan Empire, there were actually 2 Mauryans that followed him, but after he died, but they didn't last very long. But after his kingdom started to fall apart, Buddhism kind of started to die out in that area of India also. So how could he have known, again, that this emissary that he sent to Sri Lanka, that now Sri Lanka would become the epicenter of the traditional Theravada type of Buddhism? And so that's really the important point here. King Devananda Piatissa is part of the reason we're here today in Northeast Indiana celebrating this Poson full moon day.
Any insights from that story, the beautiful story that Bruce shared?
Hello. thank you both very much for the wonderful stories about this. I might be a little bit far away. Okay, here we go. So I thank you both for telling us these stories and things that I didn't know before. And so I just wanted to chime in about what the whole experience means to me here, as someone who is not born into Buddhism, and who's somebody who's from a different country than Sri Lanka, and somebody, Bruce is very enthusiastic about history. I'm not so much, so he has a lot of this knowledge. Both of you have a lot of knowledge about this. But to me, all I can say about it is what I experience. And what I'm experiencing is because, so to this day, the Poson full moon, what it means to me is that 2,500 years later, Buddhism is here. And the temple, somehow in my life, in this life, I found the temple. And none of that would have happened if it was not for these events that we're commemorating on this day. That, yeah, I don't know the specifics of the history or the story and things like that, but I know how it feels. I know the effect. And the effect that it has had on my life when I found the temple 17 years ago has been tremendous. It's just been completely altered the whole course of my life. And so to me, that's what we're celebrating this day. And the way that we celebrate it, the way that I would celebrate it, is by practicing exactly the philosophies. There is the knowledge of the stories and all of the really useful academic knowledge, but there's also the experiential knowledge of practicing the philosophies. And to me, that's when it becomes real. That's how we keep it alive, is by knowing it and practicing it. And so that's kind of what we were doing here, in my mind, with the meditations. We are putting into practice now the things that were started all these years ago. And so I'm just incredibly thankful that we are here today in this experience, that I am here in this experience. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I mean, what you say makes complete sense, right? So, yes, we follow these rituals, but at the end, when you think about Buddhism, right, it's improving and training your mind. So how do you do that? Through meditation, right? And if you think about the last word of Buddha, that last word of wisdom from Buddha, he kind of alludes to that as well. So when our Lord Buddha was in Kusinara, about to pass away, right, there were monks like crying because they were very sad because their teacher was passing away, right? So what Lord Buddha said was, if you want to respect me, follow the path. If you want to respect me, follow the path to enlightenment, improve your mind. That's the only way that you can respect me. So you're absolutely right. So, just studying, history is of course important. It's very interesting, but just studying it doesn't mean much, right? So that's why it's really important to kind of take our time to improve ourselves, improve our mind. But then again, right, there's no force. You can do it in your own time. We have our different journeys, right? We are very different people. We have very different weaknesses. It all starts with identifying your weaknesses, right? That self-evaluation and making your own path. And from Buddhism, right? I mean, you could basically look at it and question it, right? You're not asked to kind of follow it as is, just memorize the whole thing and become like a believer as is. Our Lord Buddha always encouraged us to come and question it. It's known as Ehipassiko, right? So, I mean, I think that's what it makes it very interesting, right? That's why some people make a study out of it. That's why we can discuss about it, right? And again, as May say, as we discuss about it, as we learn the stories, think about your spiritual enlightenment or spiritual improvement as well. So we're kind of talking about the significance of the Poson poetry. We talked about King Ashoka, right, and King Ashoka's contribution, and how thankful we are that he decided to send this message of Buddhism outside his country, because it was, again, very forward thinking of him, right? I mean, I guess today we can safely say that if King Ashoka did not make time to do that, if he did not make time to spread that word outside India, Buddhism would not have survived, right? Because as Bruce mentioned, after King Ashoka, there were several other rulers, right? But they were not really supportive of Buddhism. And later on, there were many conflicts, and Buddhist relics were kind of destroyed, right? I mean, many different things happened. And today, Sri Lanka is actually the epicenter of the Theravada Buddhism, right? So somehow Buddhism survived in Sri Lanka. It's all because of that forward-thinking attitude of King Ashoka. So we talked about King Ashoka. Let's take a quick look at his friend King Devananda, who was the Sri Lankan king at that time. So does anyone knows? I mean, Bruce kind of alluded to the story of Arahath Mahinda coming to Sri Lanka and meeting Devananda. Would you kind of like to know a little bit more details about how exactly this happened? Or if you know, would you like to share what you know here with us? All right. So I'm hearing yes here. So I'm basically all right. I'll go through it. I'll go through that in detail. So again, as Bruce mentioned, right, King Ashoka and King Devananda, they were friends, more like pen pals though, because they've never met each other. They've exchanged gifts, and while King Ashoka was writing these letters to King Devananda, he really kind of talked about this great philosophy he started following and how it changed his life and all that. I mean, King Devananda kind of read it, but I don't think he really understood it. But he kind of knew that, King Ashoka was following this great philosophy, and he's going to share some of it with neighboring countries. But I mean, this is like 2,000 years ago, right? So he knew that King Ashoka was going to send his emissaries to Sri Lanka, but he had no idea when or how, right? So King Ashoka, again, like Bruce mentioned, Sri Lankan king was a special friend of King Ashoka. So instead of just saying just a group of emissaries, he decided to send his only son as an emissary. His only son, he was a Buddhist monk, and not just a normal monk. He had reached enlightenment by studying our Lord Buddha's teaching. So that's why we call him Arahath Mahinda Thero, right? Because he had reached that level of enlightenment. So King Ashoka decided to send his own son to Sri Lanka to spread this word of Buddhism. It wasn't just his son that he sent. So along with Arahath Mahinda Thero, there were a couple of other folks in this group. So there were a couple of other monks. So I'm trying to remember. So these are stories that I hear from, that I heard from my mom. So let's see whether I remember. So there was the monk called Ittiya, Uttiya, Sambala, Padasala, 4 fully ordained monks, and 1 novice monk. His name was Sumana. So Ittiya, Uttiya, Sambala, Padasala, Sumana. So Sumana is a novice monk. The 4 others were fully ordained monks. And that wasn't it. There was another person. His name was Banduga. He was he wasn't a monk. He was like a layman, but he wasn't just like a layman like us, because he was also in an advanced spiritual stage. He was very close to being Arahat. The stories say that he was at the stage called Anagami, which is like one stage below Arahat. So what's the significance of sending these various different folks in this group, right? So they were fully ordained. There was, first of all, there was son, King Asuka's son, the Arahath Mahinda, and there's 4 fully ordained monks, and 1 novice monk, and 1 attendant, who is not a monk. So when you think about it, in order to establish a religion, in order to establish Buddhism in Sri Lanka, just sending 1 emissary wasn't enough, right? The establishment and the survival of Buddhism really depend on our monks, right? Because they are the ones who study the Buddhism. They are the ones who know the Tripitaka. They are the ones who advise us. So really, the monks are really important for the survival of Buddhism. If you look at the history of Sri Lanka, you'll see that throughout the famines, throughout various difficulties, our noble monks maintained this religion, right? So that's the reason for sending 4 ordained monks and that little novice monk. So as you know, when you look at a life of a monk, in the beginning, you kind of study as a novice monk, and then there's this ordination ceremony where you become like a fully ordained monk. So I think if you it happens around like 20 years of age, or it depends. It depends on like at the age where you become a monk. So he sent this novice monk so that they can show that how to become a monk and how to become a novice monk to a fully ordained monk. So by sending the novice monk, people get exposure to how to become a monk if they want to, right? And then the ordinary or layman called Banduka, right? He wasn't a monk, but he was sent because they're sending this group of emissaries to a land that was not known for believing in any organized religion, right? I mean, they were just doing their own thing. So how do they even know how to be Buddhist, right? They needed someone to look up on. They needed someone to idolize. So that's the reason for sending this, attendant called Bandukas. And then people can understand how do you become an attendant in Buddhism. And as the story goes, later Banduka also became a monk. So that's a troop that King Asoka or Emperor Asoka sent to Sri Lanka. So as Bruce mentioned, they arrived in this beautiful area called Mihintale. It's also known as Nisaka Power. I mean, it's really a mango forest. So there's like this rock, very kind of like you can kind of see it from far away. It's like a very significant rock in this area. It's known as Nisaka Power. So this entire group arrived there. So this entire area was like full of natural beauty. Even if you go there this day, it's like that. So as Bruce mentioned, many Buddhists kind of go there to visit this sacred site. It's kind of has become like a habit among Buddhists. And I've been there when I was very small, and I still remember like how green that area was. Like so full of trees and wildlife. It's like a very calming experience just going there, just because of the area, right? So during King Devananda Theto's time, it was the same. It was like a mango forest. But that day, King Devananda had no idea that this group was coming this day. So that day, it was kind of like a festival of a different sort. This festival was about hunting. So as usual to like various other cultures, there was this festival where the king and his colleagues would go after wildlife, like mostly bucks, like deer, for example, right? And they basically kill the biggest buck, and the person who basically killed the biggest buck get the reward from the king, and they would celebrate, and they cook that, and then they have a really nice dinner around that celebration. So that's what was it about. Again, remember that these folks did not have any organized religion, right? I mean, as you are aware, as Buddhists, we don't hurt or we don't kill any living thing. But King Devananda, he wasn't a Buddhist. He probably heard about it from King Asoka, but he probably didn't understand a whole lot of it. So King Devananda was chasing after a deer. And when he was chasing after a deer, he basically got his arrow and a bow and about to shoot the arrow. And it didn't work because he saw kind of like a light or a ray of sunshine or something coming from top of this rock known as Mihintale or Mihintale. And at the same time, he heard someone calling his name. So someone basically called him Pisa. And King was baffled because this is a king. Who calls kings by the first name? Right? I mean, people call him by Your Majesty, Your Highness, right? But no one calls a king by his first name. He was just baffled. He looked at the top of the mountain, top of the rock, and then he saw this like strange troop. Most of them wearing this like yellow robes. So that was the first time he has seen a monk in his life. So I think at that point he probably kind of understood, oh, this could be the troops sent by my friend, and he probably felt a little bit embarrassed as well because he was trying to kill a buck at that point. So at that point he basically took away his arrows and the bows, and he basically knelt down and sat down and listened to whoever's talking to him. Now, as the story goes, Arahath Mahinda Thero. So at that point, Arahath Mahinda Thero identified. I mean, he obviously knew that this is the king. This is his. The Devananda is the king of Sri Lanka. And before saying anything about Buddhism to this king, he wanted to see how intelligent this king was. Right? I mean, of course, he caught this king chasing a deer, right? That's not a good first impression at all. And before mentioning anything about Buddhism or anything at all, he wanted to see how intelligent this Sri Lankan king was. So the story that I heard is, so Arahath Mahinda basically asked him, like, basically quizzed him. I think we kind of know these questions as like mango puzzle or mango quiz, and I'm not sure I remember all the questions, but it goes something like, so of course this is a mango forest, right? So Arahath Mahinda points to a mango tree and asks the king, king, what tree is this? So king says, of course it's a mango tree. And then Arahath Mahinda asks, other than this mango tree, other than this mango tree, is there any other trees? So, of course, king said, of course, I mean, this is just one mango tree. There are many, many other mango trees. So then again, the Arahath Mahinda goes, so other than this mango tree and other mango trees, is there any other trees? The king was like, yeah, I mean, there are so many different flowering trees, there's so many more trees. And then the Arahath Mahinda asked, oh, no, this is the toughest question. Other than other mango trees and other trees, is there any other tree? King goes, yes, this tree. So that last question is a little difficult, right? So that's how Arahath Mahinda assessed how intelligent this king is. Because if the king is, intoxicated or not so intelligent, there's no point preaching, right? And the same question he asked in a different manner. So he asked, king, do you have relatives? King was like, yes, I have relatives. Do you have non-relatives? King said, yes, of course, I have so many non-relatives. And then he goes, do you have anyone that is not a relative or not a non-relative? King goes, yes, that's me. So again, that third question, it's a little tricky, right? So King basically aced it, right? So at that point, Arahath Mahinda knew that this king is very intelligent and he has the wisdom to understand a very deep religion, a very deep philosophy. So, and from that point, he preached the Buddha's teaching, and then, the rest is history. So that's how the introduction of Buddhism happened, as I've heard it through my mom and through my mom's mom. So now that you know kind of the story in full detail, I kind of want to just hear from all of you, because I've been talking for almost, 30 minutes plus, right? So I want you to talk as well. So tell me what you think.
Okay, I have to add something really quickly because it's a tie-in to the role of women in Sri Lanka. One of the important outcomes of this meeting with Mahinda and Devananda is that suddenly everybody started converting to Buddhism. In fact, so many people started converting that women wanted to become nuns. But according to the rules, which are a little mysterious to me, only a nun is able to sponsor another nun. So a couple of years after he sent his son, he sent his daughter, who was a nun, a Buddhist nun. He sent her, and she was able to establish, to set up nuns around Sri Lanka, to ordain is the word I was looking for, nuns around Sri Lanka. And a really important thing that happened was that King Ashoka wanted to send another gift to his friend King Devananda. So he specially selected from the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya a special branch, and he especially selected a branch from the south side of the tree because he knew that branch would be coming south to Sri Lanka. And to this day, you can visit that tree. That tree is still alive in Anuradhapura, and we have a cutting from it right here at our temple right here. We have a very small version of it. It doesn't really like our Indiana winters, but it survives and does well in the summer. So it's important to remember that women played a very important role in this history also.
I just wanted to say thank you. It occurred to me when we were talking about King Ashoka that it reminded me of Bhante Devananda so much, because he is a good emissary, really, to the United States for Sri Lankan Buddhism. And we all have felt so welcome to be here. I know I loved it from the moment I came to the temple here. It was so inviting, and the Sri Lankan community, I know how difficult it is to be in another country, especially maybe when you don't speak the language and all the customs are different. And I love watching how you all, the Sri Lankans, invite us into your traditions, like this one today. And it's really wonderful for us here and all the people of Indiana and all of the other states in the United States to see the people are just people. And I just wanted to say thank you, because it's a very special place here for that reason. And thank you, Bhante, very much for letting us be free to introduce other things, especially just like the Kundalini. You've always been so gracious in allowing me to express that part of myself. And I think when people can express the other parts of them that are different in one place is very precious. Yeah. In providing the love and kindness that you talk about it is practiced here, loving kindness to all people. So thank you so much, and thank you for the lovely discussion today. Wow, it's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. That's a very kind thought. I mean, really, when you think about it, Bhante Devananda, it's kind of like Emperor Asuka, right? Spreading his word around United States, right? Yeah, he has the forethought to know that you should, when you have this kind of like a precious teaching that can benefit everyone, right? You should spread it around, and you should welcome everyone, right? Doesn't matter what you believe in, right? You're all welcome here. So that's exactly the same kind of environment that we have here. So I never thought about it like that. So it's a very interesting comparison. Thanks for bringing it up. Yeah. All right. So let's see. So again, I'm kind of taking bits and pieces from Bruce and his stories. Bruce again mentioned that the introduction of Buddhist nuns to Sri Lanka, right? So again, as a woman, right, that's a very important event for me, right? Because I'd like to have the freedom. If I want to become a nun, I want to be a nun, right? I want to have the freedom to be that. So, like Bruce mentioned, during King Devananda time, of course, Arahath Mahinda came in, spread the word of Dhamma. Many people became monks and many people became attendees. But for women, in order to become a nun, you have to be ordained by another nun. So at that time, there was not a single nun. So that's why arrival of King Asoka's daughter, Sanghamitta, is very important for us. So arrival of Sanghamitta is a significant event in women's history because that gave us the freedom to become whichever path we choose. In fact, during that time, King Devananda queen, who's known as Anula, and I believe hundreds or thousands of her attendees or friends, they became nuns following Sanghamitta. So think about having that freedom, right, to do whatever the path that you choose to become or choose to go through. So that's one reason the arrival of Sanghamitta is very important for us. And the second reason, again, as Bruce mentioned, with Sanghamitta, she brought a sapling of the bo tree to Sri Lanka. So it was said that she arrived at this special port in Sri Lanka, and the King Devananda he waded into water neck deep and accepted this golden bowl containing the sapling of the bo tree, sapling of the sacred bo tree, and brought it to his kingdom. And then from that day, he had special temples built around it, special rituals. Again, as Bruce said, if you go to Sri Lanka right now, you can still see that tree. It's still there. I mean, it's really amazing to believe, right? 2,000 plus years, it still survives. And you can go there, you can do your rituals. So it's amazing when you think about the historical perspective of it. And there's another reason that the arrival of the nun, the Buddhist nun, Sanghamitta, is also important in cultural, when you think about the cultural side. With Sanghamitta, she bought the sapling of the bo tree. She also bought a bunch of people. Who are these people? They were agricultural experts, craftsmen, artists. Because, as I mentioned to you, right, during King Ashoka's time, it was a cultural renaissance. People began to kind of exploit these, artistic aspects, and they became very, very good at it, like arts, crafts, right? I mean, if you look at inscriptions and rock carvings, you can clearly see that they survive even today. So Sanghamitta brought a bunch of experts like that to Sri Lanka. So that completely changed the culture that we had. So if you visit to Sri Lanka these days, you can see beautiful rock temples, right? Very, very beautiful carvings and art. So all of those are influenced by the people who brought to Sri Lanka by that Buddhist nun Sanghamitra. So that's why arrival of the Buddhist nun Sanghamitra is a very important event that kind of happened after the introduction of Buddhism. So we actually celebrate this event because it is said that the nun Sanghamitra arrived to Sri Lanka during the last Poya Day of the year. So this is during the December Poya Day. So we kind of celebrate that as well. But I thought, to kind of point out these extra details because, that led to women's revolution and also a cultural revolution, right? Arrival of this Buddhist nun Sanghamitra. So Bruce, do you have any interesting tidbits to add to that regarding the arrival of Sanghamitra or anyone else? Yeah. You guys are certainly putting him on the spot.
Well, let's see. maybe a takeaway from all of this, backing up from Sanghamitra for a minute, is that it's important to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. Think about King Ashoka. I mean, he sent these emissaries to various lands to demonstrate that Dhamma was ruling by the Dhamma was a perfectly, acceptable way to rule. And if it had not been for that event, if he had not sent emissaries to other lands, as you pointed out, Buddhism may have died out. But with the coming of Ashoka and King Devananda, Buddhism was thrust out onto the world stage, and it became a world religion. And it spread to different areas of the world slowly, and now it has spread to America. So we're at a really critical point right now. This is the very beginning of Buddhism in North America, and we are all a little bit responsible for what we will pass on to the next generation. So don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. I was a little afraid when I came here the first time, actually, because I wanted to be very respectful and I didn't know how to react. But it's a very welcoming, as it has been pointed out. It's a welcoming atmosphere, and if you never step outside of your comfort zone, you're never really going to learn anything new. So that's what we're doing here today. We're learning something new, hopefully.
Right. Thank you, Bruce. So let's see. What do we want to discuss next? So we talked about arrival of Arahath Mahinda Thero, and then arrival of Sanghamitra, the Buddhist nun, and the arrival of the Bodhi tree, the sapling of the Bodhi, sacred Bodhi tree, right? So let's take a quick historical look at the Bodhi tree. So why the Bodhi tree is very important for us? So as you probably know, our Lord Buddha Gautama, he attained enlightenment under the shade of this Bodhi tree, right? I mean, you might think that, what's up with that? It's just a tree. But it's not just that, right? Because that tree provided the shade for him. So it doesn't matter. I mean, it's okay. It's a tree. But he was still very thankful for the shade provided by that tree, because it helped him to achieve his goal of enlightenment. And the story says that he spent 1 week after reaching enlightenment, basically, being very thankful for that Bodhi tree. So, this sacred Bodhi tree that they had in Emperor Asoka's time in India, right? So, the Buddhist nun Sanghamitra took a sapling out of it and brought it to Sri Lanka. this is also so very significant. The reason for that is even during King Asoka's time, Emperor Asoka's time, there were some people who were not very accepting of this Asoka's devotion to Buddhism. So as the story goes, one of his wives, one of his queens, were very jealous of this sacred Bodhi tree because Emperor Asoka was obsessed with it. So he kept, going there, like making offerings, building temples on top of temples. So this queen was very jealous of this attention that he provided for this tree. So at some point he tried to kind of destroy the tree. She tried to destroy the tree. But according to the stories, this tree still survived. Nothing happened to it. But unfortunately, as you're already aware, King Asoka was a great supporter of Buddhism, but the other emperors, they were not so much, right? They were not very supportive of Buddhism. They were not very accepting. So later, as the story goes, this sacred relic, the sacred tree, it didn't really survive because, in order to maintain this really old tree like that, you have to take care of it. So the tree in India didn't really survive. The tree that you see right now in India is a direct descendant of that tree, but it's not the 100% original tree, as you would say. However, when you think about a tree in Sri Lanka, that's even older, right? So that's 2,000 years old. It's still there. So it's even older than the tree that we have in India. So think about the importance or the significance of bringing that teeny tiny sapling, by the Buddhist and Sanghamitra. If she didn't do that, we would not have a Bodhi tree. And of course, we have a sacred tree in India, but the Bodhi tree that we have in Sri Lanka, it's even older, right? It's more related, closely related to that original tree. So, when you think about all of these long-term consequences, it's amazing, right? The one person's forethought led to all of these events, like cascade of positive events. So it's something for you to think about. And talking about the Bodhi tree, I know that we have a Bodhi tree here in Indiana Buddhist Temple as well. And I'd like to kind of ask all of you about, how you take care of the Bodhi tree. Because Bodhi tree, it is not a tree that is used for a temperate climate like this. It grows in a tropical climate, right? India, Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia. But somehow you all maintain that tree in this very different climate. And I'm asking this from you because I'm not doing anything with that, right? I mean, I live like several hours away from here, so I do not know what sacrifices that you are doing, what contributions that you are doing to maintain a tropical tree in this temperate climate. So, tell us a little bit about this special tree that we have here in Indiana Buddhist Temple and all the things that you are doing to maintain it.
Yes, the Bodhi tree at the Indiana Buddhist Temple is very special indeed because it takes a lot of mindful effort to keep it alive. Because as Bhagya said, it is not native to this environment, not even close. And so really I would say if there's a father of this Bodhi tree, it would be Bruce, because he is the one that knows right when it's time to bring it outside, when it's time to put it back inside, and he's the one that really cares for it, I feel. But I know for sure that it's very heavy and that we have to lift it inside and outside multiple times a year. So what I'm describing is that it takes effort, and while we're doing this, it takes mindfulness. It takes a mindful purpose in order to keep this tree alive here. And so for us, for me, that's what it means. It shows devotion. It shows purpose. It shows meaning. And then the history that comes with it is really kind of mind-blowing if you think of it. Of course, the clone, the baby of a tree like this. And it just shows kind of the whole thing that we're talking about today. What I'm taking away from it, I guess, in a sentence or something, is that the actions of one person can cascade through generations, through thousands of years. The actions of one person can be that powerful. It doesn't really matter if you're an emperor or not. It just shows that the actions can be like this. And so that's what I have to say about the tree, the beautiful Bodhi tree here at the Indiana Buddhist Temple. I hope it has many more years of life left in it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I appreciate that sentiment about taking care of the tree. I have to admit, all we really do is water it and watch for the first frost date in October and the last possible frost date in May. So that's what we do. I mean, it loves the hot, humid summers of Indiana. But I have a question for you, actually. Isn't it true that when new temples are established around Sri Lanka, that a cutting from the original Bodhi tree in Anuradhapura will be planted in the new temple? We visited a temple and we asked them how old their Bodhi tree was. And I had no idea how old the temple was. And he said, oh, it's about 15 years old. So isn't it true that new trees are established around Sri Lanka from the original tree?
I think so, but I would like to direct that question to Bhante Devananda because he knows much better than I do.
Well, because I know there's a cutting from the tree at Kotte Temple in Colombo. So.
Yes, some temple having original the branch of Bodhi tree original Bodhi tree from Anuradhapura. Some temple don't have Bodhi tree from the Anuradhapura Bodhi tree. The Anuradhapura temple is still making baby. They collect seed from original Bodhi tree and they planted the Bodhi trees at Anuradhapura temple. Yeah. Some temple having, some temple not.
I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate the history. As an American, we have a tendency to think that history started in 1492, and if we go deeper than that, we tend to go back through the Roman Empire and maybe back to Greece, but. It's fascinating and enlightening and inspiring to hear these stories of great peoples and great empires that are beyond our development, and to develop something as beautiful as Buddhism, and something that has trees in it that are older than our country. It's just absolutely fascinating and inspiring, and I just wanted to thank you for bringing that to us today.
Thank you, sir. It's very nice of you. All right, so I'm not entirely sure how good we are on timing, Bhante.
We can.
Okay. So during this, remaining time, let's kind of talk about the effect of Buddhism to reshape our culture. So let's start with Sri Lankan culture, and then we can talk about the culture that we have here in Indiana Buddhist Temple as well. So as I mentioned to you, before the arrival of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, there was kind of no organized practice or no organized philosophy at all during that time. But after the arrival of Buddhism, everything changed, right? It was kind of like this great spring or like this great event that changed the history of our country. So, due to a couple of reasons. So, like I mentioned to you, you know, one side of that is, non-Sanghamita, Buddhists like craftsmen, agricultural experts. So that led to sort of a change of a culture, right? Because with these experts, now Sri Lankan natives, they learned these, authentic crafts and arts through their generations, right? So that kind of built their expertise. And so that's just one side of it. And also when it comes to agriculture, right, the agricultural expertise that they gain from these great people, I would say it probably had contributed to Sri Lanka becoming an agricultural nation, because the nation really depends on its agriculture, mostly rice, but it's essential part of us, essential part of our culture as well. So that's just one side of it. And also Buddhism shaped the society in a very different manner. If you think about the Buddhism, one of the main things in Buddhism is 5 precepts, right? So you all know 5 precepts, like Panatipata, Vermani, Sikkhapada, Gacchami. So what happens is, through these 5 precepts, we basically make a promise to ourselves that we are not harming any living things, we are not stealing, we are being faithful in our relationships, and we are avoiding false speech, and we are avoiding intoxication. So these 5 things, if you look at it, it's not just religious. Anyone can follow it. I mean, it doesn't say, oh, you have to be a Buddhist to follow these 5. Anyone can follow it and have a good life by following those. So these 5 precepts became the center of life in Sri Lankans, right? So this became a practice for everyday person, like everyday citizen, right? Because this was something that was kind of engraved in the culture. This was something that was very, very essential. So that's one part of it. And also, this Buddhist teaching about doing everything in moderation, right? Do not go into extremes. So, I mean, if you look at these teachings, I mean, they're still meaningful for us today, right? I mean, think about simple thing as, you're craving for food, right? If you crave food, I mean, there's no end to it, right? And the end result is bad because, you crave this so much. That's kind of going into extreme. So through the middle part, right, you understand the things, how they are, right? You develop this tolerance, and you accept to, live in moderation, right? Do everything in moderation. That became an essential part of Sri Lankan culture as well. So that's why these events were like very, very significant to reshape our culture. And when you think about the Sri Lankan culture, there is this, there is this concept called Gamai Pansalai Vavai Dagaba. So Gama means village, Pansala means temple, Vava means lake, Dagaba means the pagoda or the stupa. So everywhere you go in Sri Lanka, those are the things that you see. You see villages, right? You see temples, and you see stupas, those big pagodas, right? And then you see lakes, so the significance of the lakes, irrigation for agriculture, right? So that kind of describes our culture, right? So it became like that because of this introduction of Buddhism. So along the same lines, this concept of equality, right? So you probably heard about this when you kind of read about ancient scripts about ancient cultures, most of the ancient cultures have this like caste system, right? If you're born to something, you cannot do anything about that. You only have like that job that you were born to do, right? If you were born to, I mean, if your parents were like street sweepers, you have to be a street sweeper, no choice there, right? So there's this like system, very strict system of you cannot develop or you cannot go above what you were born to. So in Sri Lankan culture it was like very different, because this strict caste system that you see in many ancient cultures, it's not there. And the reason for that is, again, Buddhism, right? So as I kind of mentioned to you before, it doesn't matter who you are. You can be you can be a woman, man, you can be young, old, it doesn't matter. You can all become Lord Buddha's followers, or you can all learn about Buddhism and practice Buddhism. And when you come to a temple, or when you start following the religion, we are never going to judge you based on how you look like, how old you are, or where you are coming from, right? Like, for example, here in Indiana, Buddhist temple, even if you're like a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, it doesn't matter here. We don't care about those kind of things, right? I mean, they could very well be someone who's a CEO who's coming to a temple, right? Because we don't ask what you do or what you make, or like, we don't judge you based on the car that you drive or anything like that. So when you become a Buddhist, when you come here to Indiana Buddhist Temple, we are all the same. It doesn't, you can be American, you can be non-American, you can be like Sri Lanka, it doesn't matter, right? The important thing is we have the same vision, right? We have this devotion, we have this interest to learn more about Buddhism, we have this goal of improving our spirituality, improving our mind, so that kind of unites us. So Lord Buddha, even during one of his sermons, he kind of alluded to that. So he kind of saw all of his followers or attendees as, rivers or tributaries, right? If you think about rivers and tributaries, they all end up in ocean. So it's kind of like that when you start following Buddhism, right? You're all part of that ocean. When you are part of that ocean, can you kind of separate water based on, oh, this is coming from this side of the world, this is coming from that side of the world? It's really impossible. So because at that point it's all mixed. So it's just like really, really nice idea of, equality, and all of us having this really same vision that's uniting us. That's one of the great concepts brought to us by Buddhism. So that's why our culture is different, and that's what makes our culture very interesting even for today. And again, I kind of like to mention, the way that we do rituals and the way that we do here, the things here in Indiana Buddhist temple. It doesn't matter who you are. You can always come in. The door is open. You don't have to be a Buddhist. You don't even have to be a follower. You may have read about Buddhism. If you have no idea what Buddhism is, it's still fine too. We will all accept you, and at the end, we will feed you with Sri Lankan food, and you will end up loving it. All right, so we talked about, how Buddhism changed our culture, and I kind of alluded to the culture that we have here in Indiana Buddhist Temple. Does anyone else kind of like to share their experiences coming here and the experiences of Sri Lankan culture and their thoughts about that?
Yes,
I can vouch for the food.
I just wanted to add something Bruce was saying about stepping out of your comfort level and what you just said. I think in the States there's a very deep culture of fear tied to religion. Do this or you're not going to get the benefits of life, so that fear is there. That is not here in Buddhism. And I think that that is the benefit of having this here in Indiana, is when you come here, Buddhism, what resonated with me is Buddha said, do what you want, but these are the things that I have found, I have had the experience. If you do these, your life has the potential to be really wonderful. Mm-hmm. Even if you're not trying to attain enlightenment, it is just, this is the platform. And so I feel it is the lack of fear here. It is what I appreciate the most. Being able to come and be yourself, and just like you said, you don't have to know all the things about Buddhism. You're still going to get the benefits of it. And, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Yeah, very welcoming environment here. If anybody is on the fence, they should come and, just sit here. You can feel it when you just sit here, the peace of it, of just sitting here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruce and Mr. Ning, Nate. They went to Sri Lanka, right? Dharmadas and Dharmavira. Yeah, most of Sri Lankan temple established in the village, and temple having stupa, temple having village, temple having lake, right? This temple also is very similar than Sri Lankan village temple. Indiana temple still, we have in the temple in the Hoagland village, right? The in front of have lake, and on right hand have lake. And in the future, maybe before end of this year, or maybe next first month from next year, we are going to build a stupa also here. I think I have to finish all the constructions at Indiana Buddhist temple. Indiana Buddhist temple look like Sri Lankan village traditional temple.
Yeah, that's a very nice thought, Bhante Devananda. Right, I mean, basically we're trying to create a little piece of Sri Lanka in here, right? A little piece of a Sri Lankan village. So as Bhante mentioned, there's of course the temple, right? There's lakes, and Bhante is working on building a stupa here. And what's missing is the village, right? The village we already have, I feel like, right? I mean, the neighbors all around the temple, they're very supportive, very helpful. I know some folks come here and help Bhante with like moving these like huge loans that we have, right? It's impossible to maintain this by ourselves, so they're very, very helpful. And, think about this, group of village that we have, or, the group of friends that we have. Not all the friends live very close by, but they do come here whenever we have these festivals like that. And when I say friends, right, I don't mean only the Sri Lankans, right? So my experience with Sri Lanka, Indiana Buddhist temple, I'd like to share a little bit of that with you as well, because I was born a Buddhist. I was born in Sri Lanka, and the temples that I went to, we mostly met Sri Lankans and other Sri Lankans born Buddhists. So coming here, discovering Indiana Buddhist temple, I would say maybe about 10 years ago, something like that. It was a very different experience for me as well, because I was not used to seeing non-Sri Lankans in a Buddhist temple. And I have to say, I'm very glad that this happened, because previously, right, you would have people from the same culture, right, and we all kind of know our rituals, we all know our stories, right, we just follow our rituals. It was interesting and great, but now having these friends who are not born Sri Lankan, it makes it a lot more interesting for me, because, that's the opportunity for me to share my culture, share the stories that I have, and also understand from their side of things, right? Because I'm always used to seeing it as a born Buddhist, right? Now I see these other friends who are looking at Buddhism from outside, and they have these great questions, they have these great discussions. If I had not met you all, I would not have kind of thought about it, right? Because, you know, I was kind of mingling with the same bunch, right? So that's why I would say it enriched my life. I'm certainly glad, I'm certainly lucky to know you all. I know we don't see each other every day, but we do come here and get together, talk during this special festival. So very thankful for coming here and talking to us and asking questions and letting us share our stories and our history. And, you know, most of all, right, overcoming that fear and coming here. So very, very thankful for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Have a blissful day.
Okay, so with that, we'd like to end our Dhamma discussion. And as always, it's always nice talking to you. It's always nice seeing your faces. Now that the pandemic is going away, at least here in North America, I'm hoping that I will see more of each of you. I really missed you all during the last year where we had to kind of stay at home. So I'm hoping that we can get together more often and do great projects together, like, you know, the kitchen project, for example. So it will be just like those old times. And at the same time, I'm hoping we can get some time to discuss about Dhamma. And of course, I have so many things to learn from you, right? Because the way I think about it, you guys are a lot more focused on improving your mind, right? A lot more focused on meditation than I do. So that's certainly something that I want to learn from you. So yeah, let's keep this going. And thank you very much for participating. And thank you all for listening to us virtually. Have a great day.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.